You're listening to the Sustainable Angler podcast. In this episode, I interview Abaco Lodge and Bears Lodge owner Oliver White. We talk about everything from history of Abaco Lodge, how they took a science-based approach to conservation to help form the Marls National Park, to some of the interesting sustainability initiatives that Abaco and Bears Lodge are currently working on. So hope you enjoy. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, sustainability consulting for businesses who want to save the planet. To learn more, visit emergerstrategies.com.
Oliver, why don't we start out with you telling us a little bit about how you started Abaco Lodge? How did you make it down there? What's the story there?
You know, that's kind of a long story, but ultimately I started guiding when I was in college. I started guiding in the summers, worked in a shop while I was still an undergrad at Chapel Hill. And when I graduated school, I had always intended to go to graduate school, but I wasn't ready. And so I kept guiding, and that's when I started a little bit of international guiding and ended up out west. And so I was really spending my summers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and my winters down in Argentina. And, at that stage, I really loved what I was doing, but I never felt that you could make a career out of guiding. I always thought that I was going to have to transition to a more corporate, traditional career. And it just worked out that, I met a client in Argentina, in Tierra del Fuego. I was guiding at Cal Taupin, who offered me a job to go work for his hedge fund in New York. And that was Bill Ackman in Pershing Square. And, he mailed a bunch of books to me, told me to read these books. So I guided all summer in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, read all these books, called Bill. And, he convinced me to come to New York. So I left the fishing industry, with no intent of ever really returning. It was just, it made sense at that stage of my life to kind of move towards that corporate career that I always felt was inevitable. And I went to New York, and I was an analyst for this firm, and I was one of the first 5 analysts there. I was the only one without an Ivy League business school degree. And I was way, way out of my league. I tell people it's not like being thrown in the deep end of the pool. It's like being driven offshore in a boat and thrown overboard and told to figure it out. And it was really a remarkable experience for me from an education standpoint of kind of really building some financial skills and some business acumen. And I really, counter to people that see me and know me now, I loved my time in New York. It was a really wonderful thing to go and work with brilliant people every day and to be challenged and to do meaningful work that you would read about in the Wall Street Journal. And that was the path that I was kind of on. And Bill Ackman is an amazing individual, and I'd been there for a couple of years, and he called me in his office and he pushed me to go to business school. He said I was doing well and to go to school and, kind of come back and continue working. And I stopped, kind of the head down focus that job was requiring, and started writing an application to go to Ivy League business schools.
Yep.
And it was really that process that forced me to kind of get my head out of the trenches and be a little introspective, which is my general nature. And one of the amazing things about applying to business school is it helps you define your goals in life and who you are and where you're trying to go and why business school is applicable. And I finished my whole application, and I went into Bill's office and I told him that I didn't want to go, right? And it was just an epiphany for me that, I missed being outside, and I missed the adventure, and I missed the lifestyle of fishing, and I wanted to get back to that. but I knew that I didn't want to just be a fishing guide, and I wanted to go back into the outdoor space that I loved, and even sacrificing financial upside to go and live that lifestyle. But I felt that it was imperative to figure out how to be in that space and make a real living and own a real business and, create value so that it was something sustainable that I could do for a lifetime, and it wasn't just this temporary stage in my life.
Yeah.
And it was really that thought process that put me on the trajectory to get back to the lodge business, what I do now. And Bill's response was quite amazing. It was just like, all right, if that's what you want to do, then do it. And now you know how to value businesses, and you know all these things, that you've learned these skills working here in Pershing Square. So go apply that to what you want to do. Come back to me, and I'll be your investor. And
Wow.
so I was still working in New York, and I was looking at every fishing business for sale. Not lodges specifically, just any fishing business. Manufacturers. I looked at rod companies, fly companies, clothing companies, and all of them were really just terrible businesses, right? They were fun, and part of the challenge in this space is it's a passion industry, and there's a lot of people that are doing it for non-economic reasons, and then they sell at crazy valuations because people want to be part of them. And so I looked at all this stuff and was really just disheartened because there was no opportunity that I could find.
Yeah.
Everything that was for sale was, it was mispriced. It was crazy expensive for the actual value of the business, the intrinsic value of those businesses. And what put me on the path to look for lodging, or, the lodge industry specifically, was there was an ad in the Wall Street Journal. And at that stage of my life, I was still reading the Wall Street Journal every day. And there was an ad for a fishing lodge in Alaska for sale in the Wall Street Journal. So I called. And I started doing the analysis of what it would mean to buy that property, And so I went, I looked at it, I ran all these figures, built a financial model, and I was like, this is actually interesting. This is a cool business. And what deterred me from the Alaska business was it's a very short season. This was a fly-out lodge, so you had an incredible amount of assets money tied up in airplanes and things, and you were really only open for 100 days of the year. And so if you were 80% full, you broke even. And if you were 100% full, you were really profitable. And that wasn't the type of business I wanted, but it sparked a thought that there probably is some opportunity in another space. And so I specifically started looking in saltwater, and that led me to the Bahamas. And it was really a very calculated thought, right? Not only did I love that style of fishing, but instead of a fishing season that lasted 3 months, you had one that lasted 8, 9, or 10, or possibly even year round. You also changed the investment profile of most freshwater lodge businesses. They're going to require some type of private access, and that can be achieved either through permitting, that allows you permission to guide somewhere that other people are restricted, or like Alaska, where you have airplanes that allow you to go to places that other people don't go. In the saltwater space, if you can find the right property, you're fishing the ocean, which is public space, right? So your investment, in theory, is much smaller because you need a smaller footprint. You just need to put it in the right place. And the other thought there is you also end up with a floor valuation. If you own something in Bristol Bay, Alaska, and the Pebble Mine gets built, and then there's a mining disaster and that fishery gets destroyed, your investment goes to zero, right? It's worth nothing. Because if you can't fish there, there's no value. Whereas something in the Bahamas or the Caribbean or really any saltwater property, you own beachfront property. You own waterfront property, and whether or not the fishing is good, there's only so much waterfront property in the world, and it will always be worth something. So your investment has some downside protection. It will never go to zero.
Yeah, it's true.
And that was the logic that I started looking, and then I just started looking for opportunity. And the Bahamas very quickly became my main focus because I had spent quite a bit of time there, and I love the place. I love the people. I love the fishing, and I saw opportunity. And Abaco was a little bit of dumb luck, but I found the right property and was able to get it at the right price. and it's a phenomenal location. I mean, we're right in the center of the Marls, which is now a national park. It wasn't when we built. And Abaco as an island has kind of a perfect balance of infrastructure and logistics and still that out island feel. And it's worked out remarkably well as creating a very cool experience for people to come in to the Bahamas and feel what the Bahamas really is and see all the great positive things that are there and the great fishing that is there. And, it's still a very small business and, it's an effective business, but if you're really looking to generate wealth, man, this is not the industry to be in, man. It's a disproportionate amount of work for the financial reward that is possibly there. But it is a great lifestyle and it is a lot of fun and it lets me do what I really am passionate about and at this stage good at.
Well, I think, and too, something you just mentioned, which, it's like, I think people spend their entire life, trying to find something like that. And I think everyone in this industry has found that passion, and it's now, okay, well, what do I have to do to be able to be to live this lifestyle in perpetuity? And so, but Abaco in particular, that's pretty awesome. I thought it was a national park. The Marls was when y'all bought it. So this actually was pretty lucky then that, hey, they decided they would make this a national park in front of your lodge, which is amazing.
Well, yeah. I mean, that it was really made a national park because of the bone fishing. And that was not the case when we started, but from the very first year that I opened up, we were engaged with Bonefish Tarpon Trust along with other lodges and other local guides for, doing a very detailed bonefish study on the island about bonefish movement and spawning aggregations and tagging and tracking and growth study and population. And, we've tagged thousands and thousands of fish on Abaco now and have really good scientific data that help make the argument of why it should be protected and become a national park.
Gotcha. So that the protection came as it sounds like a direct result of some of the research that was being done in that area, which just so happened to be the Marls. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's right. And really, there were independent guides fishing the Marls before I opened up, but there was no lodge on the Marls, right? We were the first one. At the time that we opened, there was one other lodge on the island, way on the southern tip, and now there's a couple others that have opened since. But in a lot of ways, we helped raise the profile of what the fishing is on Abaco. And, we hosted the scientists for BTT over and over again to help, facilitate this research.
That's really cool. Is there any data or anything that sticks out to you from that research that you care to share?
Yeah, there are a couple things that I find really fascinating. One is that bonefish have a very small home range, right? They live in about a square kilometer, and that's their home, and they don't really move that much, except to spawn, and then they will make a massive migration to go to spawn, and there are very few known spawning sites. And so in Abaco in particular, there appears to be kind of one spot where every fish on the island goes to spawn, and these fish make a massive migration to get to that. And then they return right back home, and then they stay in their little square kilometer. And so it's really important as not only an angler, but as a guide and someone who's, benefiting economically from this to understand what that means for fishing pressure. And if you go to that same flat and hit it over and over and over again, you are hitting the same fish over and over and over again. And it does have a detrimental impact. And so it really changes the way guides think about putting pressure on these fisheries and the amount of boats that's appropriate and things like that. The other part that I find really interesting is how slow the bonefish in the Bahamas grow, right? And so the data really says that a 6-pound bonefish in the Florida Keys, which is genetically the same fish that we have in the Bahamas, is 6 years old. And that same fish in the Bahamas is 16 years old.
Really?
So if you think about a 6-pound bonefish, which is a good one, but not a big one, to think that fish is 16 years old is a crazy thing. And it also lets you know how fragile these fisheries are and how important it is to take care of them.
Yeah. And so that is super interesting. I mean, 16. How long does a bonefish live? Do you know that offhand? Typically,
yeah, so if you take that same thing, I think the oldest bonefish documented was one in Abaco, which was 25 years old. The only proper way to age a bonefish is is from its otoliths, its ear bone, so you have to have some mortality. But a few years ago, we had a big fish, got eaten by a shark, and the shark just ate its tail. And so without just the tip of its tail, the fish was right at 10 pounds, which is a trophy bonefish. So you call the fish just over 10 pounds, and that fish was 25 years old, scientifically documented on Abaco. And I believe that's the oldest bonefish ever recorded by Bonefish Tarpon Trust. And then you take that, another interesting kind of data point is for many, many years, the world record bonefish, not on fly, was caught on Abaco, and that fish was 17 pounds. And so if a 10-pound bonefish is going to be 25 years old, how old were those 17-pounders back when that was still around?
That is super interesting. 25-year. I just had no idea they lived that long. But that, and also the fact that there was another record bonefish on Abaco. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't happen to necessarily be in the Marls, right? I mean, Abaco is shaped like a backward C. That world record bonefish was on Green Turtle Key, which is one of the outer keys, which is not necessarily where we fish all the time, but is certainly places that we do go out there to go target, big fish.
Yeah. All right, so we've talked a little bit about sort of the marls and the fishery on Abaco and how spectacular it is. I will say I've have been there and can attest to how amazing the fishery is. But I'm also curious to know more about Abaco Lodge's operations and what y'all are doing related to sustainability. Like I know, obviously, you're Kick Plastic, and then we can just sort of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that for me, one of the things that I think is very important as an angler and an outdoorsman is I feel that if you're going to go participate in these pursuits, that you have an obligation to give back. And there's lots of ways to do that. And you can donate. There's tons of great causes that do great work that would benefit greatly from pure cash donations. And you can put in your time and donate your time. And you can also help just set the example. And as a business, we try to do all of those things. We do support a lot of great causes, and we also kind of view our position as an influencer in the space and want to use that to help show people how to do the right thing. And it's a challenge. It's a remarkable challenge to try to pull off the experience we want in somewhere as difficult as the Bahamas at large, and then to do that and try to do it in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way as much as possible is always something we try to improve. And one of the lowest hanging fruits for us was to go Kick Plastic, right? I mean, when you start looking at the figures of how detrimental plastic is in the oceans, where we're making our living, we just felt it was important to try to eliminate that single-use plastic to whatever degree we can. And you find out really quickly it's both incredibly challenging to get rid of, but also very easy to reduce your consumption very quickly. And I actually had two lodges in the Bahamas. There's Abaco Lodge, and then I also have Bears Lodge in South Andros. And kind of between those, we're taking, 1,500, 1,600 anglers a year, and we're open for 9 months of the year. And you extrapolate that out, and we were using literally 100,000 water bottles a year. Staff, clients, it's hot. You need to be drinking water in the boat. And the Bahamas has no recycling for that, not on the out islands where we are at least. And so you literally would ship these water bottles to the island from somewhere else, and you would consume it, and then that trash would just get dumped in the landfill on the island to be there forever, and more than likely just be there till there's a big storm, and all that landfill goes underwater, and it ends up back in the oceans. And we just, you know better now. You know that's a terrible thing, and other people had set precedents to do this, kick plastic, and so we made a big push in the last couple of years to move towards being plastic free. And at both locations now, we no longer offer any plastic bottles. We have a great reverse osmosis UV purified water system. We provide Yeti bottles for everybody. We have water bottle fillers at the bar. We have a water bottle filler in the back for the staff. And we've made great efforts there and had a really positive feedback from the majority of our guests about doing that. And hopefully a few of those, take that away and not only appreciate our efforts, but will implement that somewhere else in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and it was everywhere. I loved, arriving on Abaco and having a ready to go water bottle on the bedside table and refillable stations around. It's really, to me, I think it makes it a more considerate and also a more caring operation versus, if I went to a lodge just hypothetically and, they're handing out plastic water bottles, I would kind of be like, what? Like, you're a fishing lodge, right? Like, what? Seems like we're missing the mark here, but y'all have done a really great job with that. And I know that I would imagine, I don't imagine, I know that there's an economic benefit there too, in terms of you're not having to spend money on a bunch of bottled water, right? I mean, that's part of it's doing the right thing, but it also, there is a business case for it, which saves you money too, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, that was an unexpected benefit, right? I mean, the idea, and we'll back up. And so I had Rick and Emergent Strategy come to Abaco and do a sustainability analysis for us, right? And more than anything, just to help quantify and get someone outside looking in to figure out what we could do to do a better job, right? I mean, we try to do the right things, and but there's always great to have somebody who's a professional come and look at it and help. And one of the things that having Rick and Emergent Strategies come has really helped us realize is there is an economic benefit to doing the right thing. I expected there just to be cost, right? To go in and make an effort to be more environmentally friendly, I expected that to have a negative financial consequence on our business, and it was a price we were willing to pay. But I think for a lot of it, it actually can be really beneficial. And the kick plastic is a great example. I mean, if we're using 100,000 water bottles a year and they're costing 20 cents, and now we're, not doing that, you have an initial investment in all the Yeti products and filling stations and things, but in the long run, it will become a very beneficial investment for us, and we're doing the right thing. So it's kind of a real win on all sides.
Yeah, and that's the, for any business, I think that's a lot of people miss that point. Is sure I know that y'all are doing it for the right reasons anyway, but there also is a real business case for a lot of this that I think on the surface most people would just write off as being like, oh, well, we're just not going to go down that road. But then they see that, hey, well, hang on, we could actually save a lot of money doing this, and it's good for the environment. Like, I mean, it's just the vast majority of cases, in my experience in the field of sustainability, it has been more eye-opening and really awesome to see from working with clients is they say, wow, this is to the same thing you just said is, this is not just, there's an environmental benefit to this. And obviously we want to protect the resource and protect what we love, but this is actually going to save us money. So it's like everybody wins. It almost seems too good to be true, but it's a real thing.
No, and then you can reposition that money that you save there. You can then move that towards other environmental programs that maybe don't have as high of a return, and you really can kind of double down.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's the other thing too that I will just throw this out there since we are sort of talking about this a little bit, is that most everyone who's maybe considering sustainability or is interested in that needs to understand that it's a process. It's not a flip the switch type of a deal, and you always start with things that you can control, grab some low-hanging fruit and see the benefits of that. And once you realize the value that brings to your business, you're going to more confidently reinvest in those types of initiatives. And we've seen that over and over and over again with tons of different businesses. And I just, I have firsthand experience and know what y'all have in store for the future there. And it's, keep your eyes and ears peeled, because there's some more cool stuff coming from Abaco Lodge from a sustainability perspective, I can promise. But, I know that, talking about, the plastic side of the business, is one thing. Do you have a stance on climate change and its impact on fisheries in general, or are you seeing any impact from climate change in the Bahamas?
It's hard, right? Everything is always anecdotal, and it's always over a long period of time. But one thing for certain is the weather is more erratic and it is less predictable. And although I make my living in the Bahamas, I travel all over the world and I fish a ton. And without a doubt, man, you see the impact of climate change on fisheries. And from when I was guiding full-time 15 years ago to now, if you just look in the western United States, of the predictability of what the hatches and seasons and runoff looks like, man, it is much harder to nail down than what it used to be. The snowpack is different. We had melt earlier. We're constantly having forest fires and water crisis. And I think to ignore that would be foolish. And I'm not even sure the right way to articulate that, but for somebody that both truly loves to be outside and appreciate these wild places and makes a living from it, I find it very scary. And as a new father, it's particularly worrisome of what it will look like for my son when he's my age and his kids down the road. Whether these things I love to do are even going to be options anymore.
Yep. And that's for everyone, basically what the consensus is with climate change is, it's, depending on what you read, it's 97 to 99% of climate scientists agree that, yes, there is a natural change in weather patterns. There was an ice age. Things have gotten warmer, but what is undeniable is the increase in levels of CO2 emissions, basically since the Industrial Revolution, or when we started burning a lot of fossil fuels. And the results of that are, as Oliver said, particularly in the West, you see less snowpack, warmer river temperatures, more stream closures, and that also has an impact on hatches and insect life. And then you have, as a result of that, wildfires. That's primarily in freshwater type scenarios, but also in saltwater. And we're starting to see it a lot here in Charleston too, is the increase in number of days that it floods when there's just a high tide. So you start to see sea level rise, and then they're even seeing higher levels of ocean acidification, which has ripple effects through ecosystems. So it is something that I think as anglers we should all be concerned about, but I'm also a big believer in not being Debbie Downer about it. I think that there's a lot of cool businesses out there that are doing a lot of great things to help mitigate that. And I also think, I actually read today that I think it's mangroves absorb 50% more carbon than tropical forest. That's what it was for wetlands. So, that's another interesting point to think about. I wonder how much CO2 the Marls absorbs, because there are a lot of mangroves there. But anyway, that's just my little tidbit on climate change there. So Oliver, I know that you and I have had discussions about climate change, obviously, and what I liked when I did my assessment analysis of Abaco was that you're already doing a lot of the things that can help reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that your lodge emits from Energy Star appliances, like in your kitchen, and LED lights and those types of things. Can you elaborate a little bit more on any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest advantages of having you come down was to quantify everything and gives us a baseline and gives us a baseline to which we can improve from. And so we did lots of little things after you left on your suggestion. One was, capturing some rainwater. We were making all of our own water with reverse osmosis. That obviously uses electricity. All of our electricity comes from diesel generators on the island. That's the case for all electricity in the out islands, incredibly inefficient. So, we're catching rainwater now. We've gone and put in gardens and chickens so that we're actually producing some of our own produce and organic eggs now for all the guests, which we found that people kind of enjoy participating in as much as the benefit of having it right there on site.
What are some of the nonprofits that y'all contribute to?
Yeah, really our two biggest ones are very much involved with what we do, and that would be Bonefish Tarpon Trust.
Yeah. And
then we have a really great local organization called Friends of the Environment, and those are kind of our two favorite things that we work with in the Bahamas.
Yeah, that's awesome. And love the work that y'all do with BTT, especially that's pretty wild about the spawning stuff that we talked about earlier. I really had no idea about that, but all right, and so on sort of leaving things on a positive note, which I like to try and somewhat wrap things up on, is Oliver, what's something you wish other lodges knew about sustainability that if you could leave a message for other lodges, it would what are some of the benefits that you saw that you wish maybe some others knew that were easy?
I think that most people should be less intimidated, right? It's easier than you think, mm-hmm. and it steamrolls upon itself. Once you kind of start, it's very easy to keep pushing the envelope. And I also think that most people underestimate the power of influence. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to be said to be an early adopter and a first mover in something that, for me, is so obvious. And I think that clients appreciate it. And I think that the takeaway from that is you will get more support from clients and hopefully generate a stronger relationship with them. And I think it will just increase that word of mouth marketing that, for me, really is what drives our business.
Yep. And you mentioned that too. I mean, you've got nothing but positive feedback for the most part, I guess. I won't say nothing but for the most part, like for everything y'all done with Kick Plastic, I mean, it's been all positive. I mean, and now you're growing you have your own chickens, you've got your own garden going. I mean, what's the downside to this? I mean, it just makes all the sense in the world. And like you said, once you start, it just gets easier. So my hat's off to y'all for everything that y'all are doing to affect positive change and leveraging your influence to let other people know that this is really the responsible thing that we should all be doing. And I think there's a lot to be said for you and for Abaco and Bears Lodge for taking a leadership role as it relates to sustainability and sustainable lodges. So thank you for that.
No, absolutely. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll just keep getting better at it.
All right. So we have talked about some environmental sustainability stuff. We've covered that. I do, just before we jump off, rapid fire, favorite freshwater species on fly.
Tigerfish.
All right. Salt water.
Anything on the flats. Bonefish, permit, tarpon.
All right. And because Abaco is famous for its bone fishing, although I will say, and you know this, there's tarpon and permit opportunities as well. But what would be, if you were stranded on a deserted island in the Bahamas, what is the one bonefish fly that you would wish that you had on you?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Puglisi spawning shrimp is the answer, and that you could fish it for all three of those. I mean, permit, tarpon, they'll all eat it. I mean, for a commercially readily available fly, there's nothing better. Awesome.
All right. Well, Oliver, thank you very much for carving some time out for me today on the Sustainable Angler. Appreciate everything that Abaco and Bears Lodge are doing to push the envelope with sustainability. And anyone listening, I guess it's abacolodge.com and bearslodge.com. Check it out for an amazing fly fishing experience. Thanks for your time, man.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sustainable Angler podcast. If you'd like to be notified for new episodes, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Stitcher. And our episodes can also be found at emergerstrategies.com. Thanks.